last week there was a speech you made, and you said it was an epistle from hell. That some people will consider it epistle from hell. Why do you think it is so, given what is happening in the country and that you're actually speaking truth to power?
The reason is simple. Nigeria, as we speak, is at war. But Nigeria is also in denial. There is nowhere in the world that you have so many people being killed each day, either by bandits, insurrectionists, or kidnappers, or whatever, and you think the society is normal. Nowhere. So we are poor. The difference is simply that we are pretending that we don't know we are poor.
And this war is not like the conventional war we fought before, like the 3-year war we fought, the Biafran war, Nigeria-Biafran war. So what makes this war so exceptional that even the citizens are not all that aware that a war is being fought in the country?
And that's what makes it dangerous. You see, you have the army, you have the police, and they are all now in full battle gear. But you are dealing with not another army. You are dealing with non-state actors, people who are not organized and should not be near government, are not in government. So they are for their own purposes. And what makes it worse is the fact that from what we are now hearing, many of these people are from out of Nigeria. So it's a war, it's not an internal war, it's in fact an external war. You know the man, I think Oraje from Kwara, one time acting chairman of PDP, yes. And he was the one who led the PDP people to cross over to join APC, if you remember, in 20. Yeah. In a recent interview, he said that they had brought in at first 20,000 and later 40,000 people from outside Nigeria and camped them to deal with any eventuality after the election. He implied in that the APC did not expect to win. But the implication is that if you don't expect to win and you are brought in armed people of that magnitude, then you are going to declare war literally and make the place ungovernable. Well, unfortunately, according to what he said also, it turns out that at the end, the politician who brought them in abandoned them. So they had to fend for themselves. And in fending for themselves, they found this was a lucrative country where there was no, there was no other, and you can do what you please. And they discovered ransom. And that's where we are.
If we go by what you have just said now, quoting Buraje, yes, Buraje. El Rufai was one of those leaders of APC that Buraje, who were PDP, that Buraje led to APC. El Rufai must be in the know of these people who were brought into the country to cause chaos.
Remember, there was a time he even said he gave them money. In other words, he had been involved in negotiation with them, but obviously not at the national level, but at the level of state. Yes, I expect that El-Rufai knows about this.
So he must be playing to gallery now that he's talking of going to bring mercenaries to come and fight to secure his state.
I don't think it's a matter of playing to the gallery. The situation is very confused. And don't forget that if a Nigerian man in authority, new authority, encourages non-Nigerians to create mayhem in Nigeria, it's a treasonable offense. So it's not something you admit very, easily. And that is why, if you look at the way this has been handled by the present government, they speak, they talk tough, and then nothing happens. Because there is ambivalence. Ambivalence because these were the one-time friends who've now turned enemies and certainly gone beyond what they expected. But there must be an answer. An answer is to recognize that to get ourselves out of fear, we are no longer going to say who did that or who did not do that in the past. We just now have to face the danger we are in and return peace and a reasonable order into our country. And it involves all of us. There's no question of what you did before or not. And that's why I say we are at war. So we must mobilize for that.
Who are we mobilizing? The army, the citizens, or the leadership?
All of the above. But the most important thing is that if you are going to mobilize to meet force with force, your first resource will be to be the army of retired military men all over the country. And many generals will retired over the last 20 years. And you start from them. If you can organize the retired military men in all the zones of Nigeria, you have a sizable command structure. Then the chief of defense staff could now coordinate that. Otherwise, pretending that the military as it is now, are even complaining about equipment, can return us to stability. We are wasting our time. We may go from bad to worse. However, the reason if you brought in the retired military men and organized them is that the quality of decision making, military decision making, strategic planning will increase because you will have a pool of very experienced people, some of whom may even have taken part in the war. You have that resource.
Mobilizing the military, mobilizing
The
retired
military.
military. There is a school of thought that believes that the current security architecture of the country is compromised.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
Is that why you are asking
no,
for?
No, it's implied. It's implied in what Buraje said. It's implied. Because it means things are not normal in the relationship between the security services.
Yeah. So, do you think that the 7 generals will actually welcome retired generals to come? Wouldn't there be
if
a conflict?
we're in a national emergency, we can't afford the privilege of choosing who and who you know. That is where the president, as the commander-in-chief, will use his powers to organize. Actually, people will tell you that military men don't retire. When they retire, they're in reserve.
Yeah.
So they can still be called upon to give national service when they have to. But the important point is where we are. We must now learn that national interest is the only guiding factor. My convenience, what is my personal interest does not count. And that is why we are in the mess, because the politicians, who are the ones who give the instructions for governance now, do not even realize that we're in this kind of danger I'm talking about. They're still dancing, preparing for election. But as Isibor said recently, you have to be a brave man to be confident that there will be an election in February 2023. If we go the way we are going, unless we stop things now, as start reorganizing.
Talking of Adeboye, some people have criticized that speech that he made. Do you think it was germane?
Was germane?
Yes. Should he have made that statement that he's not very sure elections will hold in 2023?
But he has made it.
Yes.
If you think it has no basis for making it, then express your own opinion, say what you think, and the basis on which you think so. The truth of the matter is that when you have an experienced person like Adeboye, you don't know all the sources of his information. Not to talk about those of them who believe they talk in regular communication with God. So, like he said, he has not yet, and he emphasized the yet, he has not yet got instruction from God. But he's an intelligent enough man. And so he judges from what is around, and he sees the dangers.
Is it not a question of double speak? Double speak, given that not quite long ago, the same Adeboye was setting up a political desk to mobilize all the
Maureen,
reading people.
we can't at this point in time afford the luxury of this debate of what one said or did not say, how did we are in danger. And whoever is I'm sure you followed the Muslim cleric in her who lost his job.
Yeah.
The truth of the matter is that people are underplaying the bad situation we're in. And as I said in the lecture I gave recently, but half of the, as Obasanjo has said, half of the people offering themselves to become our president should be in jail if the EFCC and the ICPC had done their work. The dossiers are complete. But put that aside. The truth of the matter is that where we are now, everything should be on governance, but particularly economic. People who, this country should be handled by those who, who are economic literate. Because the problem we have right now in the security situation is because of the economic situation. The day you take a handle and start re-engineering the economy, unemployment will reduce, and with it, youth restiveness will reduce, and then you can now start planning properly how to return us to a more stable governance system. So there are two things we have to think of right now. One is that we have to stabilize the security situation. Two, we have to now look for people who are economically literate. Because when we are economically, do you realize how much we owe now? In fact, there are two things that are frightening about the economy now that came out in the last 1 month. First is that all the resources, all the revenues that come to government now, 98% goes to paying, paying the interest on our loans. Not paying the loans yet.
Not paying the debt.
Not paying the debt.
Okay.
Just to service it takes 98% of all the revenue, which is why we are in the binge,
Borrowing
binge, because what it means that by the time you finish, you do not have money to pay salaries. You borrow for that. You have no money to run the various services, infrastructure, and so on. So you borrow for that. You have no money to do all the things that government should do. You borrow for that. happening to me as an individual, people will recognize that I'm bankrupt. When a state is bankrupt, we play around with it. We don't say it's bankrupt, but that's where we are now.
So, the situation, you've painted a very gloomy picture of the security situation, and then you've now moved to the economy. But the economy and the security situation and in the country is intricately interwoven.
Yes.
How much of a deep mess has the security situation in the country plunged the economy of the country?
The economy was already heading for difficult times because, under Jonathan, there was a time the growth, the GDP growth rate, yearly basis, had reached 8%. 8%. If you read the lecture I gave, remember I told you the takeoff point for most economies 7.5%.
Yes.
Sustained. Although I made the point, that's not sufficient for Nigeria because our population is growing at nearly 4%. So you have to factor that in. When you factor that, it means Nigeria should be growing at 11% minimum. That's where you can, in a decade, turn your economy around and can start on the path of fast-paced development. We're nowhere near that. Under this government, growth rates have varied between 2%. When it jumps up to 3%, we celebrate. Compared with where it ought to be, it is 1/4 of where it ought to be. So we do not only have a security emergency, we have also an economic emergency.
That's a very serious matter.
Yeah.
But if you're talking about security situation, it was also bad in 2014, 2013, from 2011, 2012, 2013. If you remember, bombs were just exploding in Abuja. We had the bombing of UN headquarters. We also have the Nanya market bombing. We also have suicide bombers exploding here and there. We've not had that kind of case. What is really the difference between what we had back then during Jonathan's and what we have now?
Go back to your records. You will find that what you are saying, what you had was an episodic situation. Occasionally this may happen, occasionally that may happen. If you have a serious government, they can take charge. But we are now where everything is happening everywhere on a daily basis. So you do not have the place you can stand on to stabilize and from there expand. That's the difference.
Okay, now it's all over the country.
Exactly.
Every part of the country is affected.
Yes.
So it's no longer localized in the northern part of the country.
That is why. But the north is worse. Because the north actually cannot solve the problems the north has now without my help and the help of other Nigerians. And that is why when people talk about that Nigeria has never been at this kind of situation before, they are right. I was 85 in January. I've never seen this country as... it's difficult to predict what will happen. We've never been in that kind of situation.
Okay, there's something I also want to, just before we leave comparison between what happened during Jonathan's time and what is happening now. Because people also had fears whether the 2015 election will hold. And actually, at a point in time, the election had to be postponed because of security situation, to get hold of what the security situation was then in the north. Is the situation different?
Do you live in this country?
Yes.
Do you follow the daily news?
Yes.
And you think there is comparison between now and 5 years ago? Do you really think there is a comparison? Take Zamfara, came into a certain extent. Niger, not to talk about where we used to. People who come and go from those areas, they've been at war. They've been at war and are still at war. Most of the important people, including Sokoto, they don't live in the states any longer. They operate from Abuja. But now, which is what the governor of Niger State was drawing attention to, what's happening now is that Abuja itself could easily be threatened. That's what the governor of Niger State said. Before, it was far away. Now, it's within 2 hours drive into Abuja. And what has happened with the train bombing, it's a completely new dimension. Up to the day it happened, would anybody have believed if you were told? But you see, each one happens, as a friend of mine put it, it's as if in Nigeria we're going through a period in which we are bewitched. People don't talk straight now, even reasonable, intelligent people. When you now want to discuss Nigeria, they switch off. We don't want to be disturbed by the bad news. Unfortunately, nobody is going to come from anywhere to solve the problem. We have to find the answer here.
Yeah.
And we start by recognizing that each of us has a part to play. So let's leave the blame game first and say, what do we do now?
So what do we do now?
First, you must get best economic minds in the country together and face the situation and drop short-term plans, perhaps 1, 2, 3. By the time you've carried out those 3 bits, you would have stabilized the place. Then you can go on a longer-term plan. This is not the time to talk about the details, but if we accept that that is what needs to be done, then we can start. Then, governance system itself. People have been shouting about restructuring. The truth of the matter is that where we are now, the federal government alone is incapable of handling whether it's the economic problem or whether it is whether it's the security problem. Therefore, there must be a devolution of authority to the lower levels, to the zonal level, and perhaps to the state level. Each one trying to contain its own. Right now, everybody, including the states, they are looking up to the federal government. They expect the federal police to come. They expect the army to come, and so on. There are things that can be done in each locality. And the problems are not the same in all the states. Therefore, you need to get to the point where each state takes charge of its environment and the problem, how to stabilize itself. Then the coordination is at the zonal level, and then the coordination is at national level. Unless you have that kind of devolution of authority, I don't want to get constitutional, that's why I'm using devolution of authority. There are things that the president can do by your executive order, and you give more responsibilities to the states. You create new fora of consultation at the zonal level. There are only 6 zones. It approximates to the regions, but you are dividing the country in manageable slices.
Yeah. When we are looking at the situation in the country, we had a ray of hope recently when the president signed the electoral bill. Does it give any hope that situation in the country could change for the better in the future? What do you think?
Well, he has signed the bill, but you can also see what happened. Political interest starts, trying to change what it ought to be. As between those who are elected in the National Assembly and those who are hoping to either become senators and so on, but who are presently ministers and so on. Where we are, that kind of this thing was not necessary. And each group was trying to use this to cover its own particular interests. The important thing is what is best for Nigeria at this time. And we do it. Personal interests will have to wait. What it means, for example, take all the fears about it. Let's face it, political parties have not done well. What we expected them to do, they have not done. That's why we need to say PC or PDP. There is so much chaos and uncertainty what to do next. But the truth of the matter is that the politicians are putting their self-interest ahead of the national interest. I am saying we have to reverse the order now. The national interest must take priority now until we get a country. Where we are now, we're not sure we have a country. Remember I made that comment many years ago, and Obasanjo quoted it in his letter to President Buhari. When you look at the way things are going, there's no point pretending. We are just managing to give the semblance of governance and so on. The truth of the matter is that in many ways the countries are not too private. Things are running on its own, and that is why the bandits are running riot. Why are they running riot? Because they thought there would be more resistance. Each time they move forward, there's no resistance. So their own ambitions now grow. It now looks to them as if they have the entire country to do whatever they please. But at least if you stabilize, by calling in the whole military, and there can be pockets of resistance to start, organized resistance to start with, then perhaps they themselves will start paying a high price for trying to divide the country. And that is the point at which they decide whether they should go back to where they came from or fight it out. Once the country is properly organized, I don't think non-state actors can overcome.
Okay, you keep gravitating back to this security and insecurity in the country. But the fact is that just yesterday, isn't it yesterday that they said that they've raided the house of the head of ISWAP and whatever it is in the region, and they captured it in Sambisa forest, and there were pictures floating in the social media of what the army has done. Does that count for something?
Maureen, I think you're not getting the message. The message we have is that most Nigerians don't believe what the government tells us, the government agencies. I'm sure you've heard people making a joke of Lai Mohammed, making a joke out of his name.
Mm-hmm.
What does that tell you? Government has to regain the confidence of the government. In fact, there are two major problems that Nigeria has to face if it's to become relevant any longer and run in peace. The gap, the chasm between the rulers and the ruled is that wide. In time past, when Okara was in charge, when Awolowo was in charge, when Ahmadu Bello was in charge, they were in touch with their people. And the people recognized their leaders. And as it was in the East, for example, before a major initiative takes place in Eastern Nigeria, Okara will go back to the village level to tell them what the government wants to do, to relate with them what they think should be done. It is only when that consultation of the people being governed is, that's when the government now goes to plan what it wants to do. Which was why in 7 years the opera was there. Eastern Nigeria came from the poorest of the three regions to the fastest growing economy in the world. I didn't say in Africa, in the world. The data are there in the Michigan State University. because you don't govern in the abstract. You govern people and their interests. And when you even talk about the economy, the government is in charge of macroeconomy, but that's not where wealth is created. That's not where employment is. Wealth and employment are created at the microeconomy level. And individual initiatives is what creates wealth, not government. Government is only going to say, okay, what do I do so that this what you're creating can be even easier? The government is not doing that. And that's why I talk about economic literates and economic illiterates running the country.
Yes, people are always saying, I understand that people are kind of.
I said two problems. That's one.
Okay.
The other one is the gap between the youth and the rest of the society. They have now their agenda. They don't believe anybody. And that's why they're doing the things they see in the politics, which is also leading to cultism, to the drug menace, and so on. Because the people don't trust their leaders. The youth don't trust their leaders. So those two problems are the problems that we have to face in the next 5 years.
So even if a new government comes, you will have to deal with that, right?
But haven't you even seen what's happening? You know Buhari is taking the easy way out. Any problem, kick it down the road, let it be somebody else. That's what he did with the subsidy and no subsidy. They suddenly said, they told us when it was going to change. And then suddenly they said it wasn't going to happen. And the subsidy thing is the greatest scam in history of this country. Because we were just busy enriching individuals. Faceless individuals, because nobody even knows who are the people who are benefiting. And the money runs in billions.
How can the government not know those who are benefiting? Are you sure they don't know those who are benefiting? Are we pretending about the fact that we don't know those who are benefiting from the subsidy scam?
I'm sure they know, but I'm not in a position to know. That's why they're in government, and I'm not.
So probably those in government are beneficiaries. That's why they don't want to point out those who are benefiting.
You know, from the ratings with Transparency International, with the World Bank and so on, you will find that on every parameter we've gone down. If you take Transparency, interpret Transparency International, what they are saying is that the government we have now in place is the most corrupt that Nigeria has ever known, despite the issue of corruption, anti-corruption and racism. It's easier to give money and to take money under present circumstances. That's what the data are suggesting.
Yeah. So let's get back to the electoral bill that was signed. Is there something good about it? Can you tell us?
The good thing is this. First is they're agreeing to technology coming into play.
Mm-hmm.
Because until technology takes responsibility for certain things out of the hand of human beings, then certain things we are incorrigible. There are things that can change. Fortunately, with technology, you take the responsibility out of the hand of individuals, whether in NEC or IT services. That's one. And it's good that has happened. Two, argument of whether you should resign 30 days. I don't think if there was still morality, because that's also the thing that has happened in the country. Our moral gauge has collapsed. People will look you in the face and say things that they know is immoral because it's promoting your interest rather than the public interest. And yet they're pushing it. The people who are ministers, who have political reason, want to be there, serving and using the authority to benefit themselves in preparing themselves to come in for the office. while the legislators, of course, didn't want them to have that advantage. Let it be a level playing field. Let all of us come and compete, on an equal basis. That's what this game has been about. And it is a good development too, because you can't tie the hand of one and free the other ones to do whatever it is. So those are the two things. But there is a fundamental thing that hasn't been done. We must have independent candidates.
Yes.
The day we have independent candidates, we will remove the tyranny of the political parties. Because right now, it's what they say, what they do that matters. It goes to the court will say this way, this way. And with the way it is in the judiciary is now, there was a time we were confident about the judiciary. Nobody is that confident any longer. You can literally buy a court judgment. That's what the indications are. But despite it, they are still honest people with integrity at the different levels of the court system. But what's lacking is that the ability to sanction and punish people deviant judges is still at infancy. When it becomes clear that if you do this, this is the consequence, and people can be deterred and feared, then things will change. The moral compass of Nigeria is now quite low. And the judges live in the same society as human beings, so you can't expect them to be saints.
Yes. When we're talking about insecurity and the doubts whether the election will hold in 2023 or not, as at this time last year, we also have the same scenario playing out in Anambra, where the people were saying that elections will not hold because of the level of insecurity. But the election came and it's gone.
Yeah, but the people that were emerging, the people saw showing forward have been the people like Soludo or distrusted. Yes. So once they saw that people showing up, including one or two of the PDP candidates, that people with integrity, people with sincerity are likely to come up. When you now said, IPOP, stop, let's have this election, they listened. That's why you had the listening. The important lesson to learn from that is that the quality of leadership is important. The day you have the right kind of people, taking the right kind of decisions, whether it is the youths, whether it is the government, all will start saying, I didn't know that can still happen in this country. That is an indication things are changing. Confidence is returning. Government can go nowhere unless those who are governed have confidence in the integrity of the people governing them. Right now, there is no such confidence.
So the quality of the candidates was one of the things that inspired confidence of IPOP to.
Yes. Yeah.
So if we move this line of thought to what is happening in Nigeria, if good candidates emerge in 2023, will that have the insecurity situation in the southeast calm down? Not just southeast, even in other parts of the country.
Obviously, the quality of human beings is important difference. That's the difference between well-run societies, organic societies, wealthy societies, and the not so wealthy and the poor. Quality of human beings. And it's not as if Nigeria lacks quality people. Even in the present race, in the lecture, although I didn't want to make much of it because I didn't want the noise over it to drown what I had to say. The truth of the matter is that there are people in the race right now, who can give the confidence and give Nigeria a new direction. But the system, the way the political parties are, and the kind of value system that has united the political parties and the ordinary people. You see, you mentioned Anambra. The indication that the people were gaining more confidence was the incident where some women told some of the candidates, yes, we are hungry, but this is your money, we won't take. Do you remember? Yes. That is an indication that when you have quality leadership, people have confidence, they are prepared to sacrifice and forgo. In Nigeria right now, among the candidates, there are some people like that.
Who are these candidates? Can we talk about them?
When you take P2P, for example, he has actually practiced all the money that he said he left. Nobody has doubted it. Not even his successor has not said it didn't happen. So at least it's possible for government to be run without all the corruption. Then he was not profligate. He was thrifty with government funds the way he would have been with his own funds. Which was why, many times we met at the airport. I go and sit in my business class and say, the governor goes to sit in his economic class. And he was consistent in that for the 8 years. That tells you quality of character. The quality of the character. Even if you went from the north, I had to deal, I know of, because he was chairman of the Nigerian Economic Summit Group when I was the director general. He knows, he ran the Northern Nigeria Development Corporation when he was in his 30s. And he's done other things. The problem we have is that in Nigeria, those who have a track record of what they have actually done are pushed out by the political touts and charlatans.
That's Mohammed.
Mohammed. When we say we're in an emergency, if we're in an emergency, we go for our best. There is no reason, for example, why, because could you well, couldn't be the president of Nigeria. There is no reason why Adesina from the African Development Bank cannot be. And I can name a lot more. Take more, for example, when he speaks, you know he knows what he's talking about. But the noise of the charlatans drowns everybody else. The day it becomes clear we are looking for quality leadership, they are enough. And the problems in Nigeria are not peculiar. They have been solved in other countries. And it's no longer rocket science. China that we are dealing with now, and everybody is hailing, China went through its own dark days. And that is why I'm hopeful. Despite the picture we've painted, Nigeria is actually at the darkest period of the night that leads to the dawn. Despite all we're saying, the changes that will reshape Nigeria is already taking place.
Yeah. So, what are these changes that will reshape Nigeria that are already taking place?
The youth, for example, have shown with what they are doing with startups and the technological companies and so on, that they have what it takes. They can compete with the rest of the world. What P2B, for example, has built in terms of personal fortunes. What take Dangote, which happened before our very eyes. Within 20 years, he's done what he's done. There are more Dangotes in this country right now. younger people who will even do it better and easier. And when we are talking about human beings in leadership, when you take a man like Anyim, Anyim has been president of the Senate. He's been secretary to government. So he's been at the top of the two levels of the three legs that run government in Nigeria. That experience cannot be for nothing. But when we were looking for president in the past, we didn't look for such people. And you can go on, I mean, you can see even the people that are already here now. They are people that can generate confidence.
Yeah. Okay. What do you...
And look at Uhuabunwa, for example.
Okay.
Uhuabunwa was also chairman of the Nigerian Economic Summit. He actually led a management buyout of Pfizer in Nigeria and took over the company. He didn't have the money, it's the banks. But it is management that made it possible. And he has not only NECA, Manufacturer Association, there is none in which he has not been at the head. It's the private sector that runs the economy, not the government. When you have somebody in governance that has that kind of linkage and insight in that kind of insights in the day-to-day management of the economy, there is hope.
Yeah. In the paper you presented not long ago, can you tell us, what do you think about this push for Nigerian president of Southeast extraction? Should it be Southeast or just Igbo?
It has best, we're talking about zones.
Yes.
And those who occupy those offices will pigeonhole them in their zones. So naturally, we are talking about Southeast extraction, not Igbo.
Okay.
All the other five, except the Northeast, has been president. But even on that, it looks to me as if there is a sea change taking place. People came out in opposition and so on. Reading the papers, I understand from one of the papers, I think it's from Realnews even. Atiku has said he's prepared to stand down.
Yes.
If he's zoned to the Southeast.
For fairness and equity, yes.
That's the mindset of a statesman. He is prepared to sacrifice his personal interests in the national interest because he knows if the Southeast takes charge of Nigeria by pulling together the peoples of Nigeria, they have the capacity to do it. One, that they won't spread all over the country. So there's no area of the country where they're not in a position to improve. Second, and more importantly, the area of the economy, like I said earlier, the microeconomy, is the area the Southeast Easterners are strong in. They've been illustrated here in Lagos, that where we live in. Like I said in the paper, we were all given 20 pounds at the end of the war. But, in Anambra, for example, at least 10 people have multiplied that 20 pounds to the point that they are billionaires. Those who can do such things need to do it for Nigeria at the national level. And as I also said, there are good men all over the country. It's leadership that can draw them all together and work in the national interest. In 5 years, you may not recognize this country. It's doable.
I know it's doable, that is the way there is a way, there is a way. But with the way the country has really nosedived, you think
If all you need is the gesture that we just talked about from article, multiply it 3, 4, 5 times, you see a sea, a sea change. People will suddenly say, is that possible? And people will now become more receptive. I was involved in Abiola. I was involved in the Abiola. And up to a week before the election, it was still a question. It was not clear whether. But within those last 2 weeks, it's as if it was a seismic change.
yeah.
You talk to this one, people who said contrary, they were now saying positively. This could happen this time. What article had done could be multiplied. And once it's accepted that national interest, let's pay the debt that Nigeria owes, and let's harness all the talents that are available in Nigeria. Yeah. Lagos, the East, the Southeasterners have developed Lagos at the expense of Southeast. That is good because the conditions, the environmental conditions for making money, have been, the people who ran the Southwest have allowed that to do. So it was more attractive to come and invest here. And that's why, Southeast people have invested so heavily. Now, when you have a center of development expanding, you now can transfer some of that wealth to other subsidiary centers of development. That's what Nigeria needs. It's easy to transfer what happened in the Southwest, the western corridor of Nigeria, from Lagos down to Sokoto. You can do the same thing from Port Harcourt down to Maiduguri. And you now find a country that is united at different levels, where there is work for people and where people move freely. That is possible. And that is where we should be going.
Yes. Some people have also said School of Thought is advocating for government of unity, national unity, government of national unity.
I have said that.
How is that going to be?
But you see, the problem is if you say it that way, politicians will once more take charge of it and shape it according to their own image. If you do the two things I've said you should do, in terms of mobilizing retired officers to deal with the security situation, devolve some authorities to the zonal levels, and so on. By the time you finish doing that, you will now have a new crop of leaders coming up at the national level. And so long as national interest is the driving force, that's the beginning of a national government. But unfortunately, if you ask the politician to do it, they'll mess it up. So that is why start from the least. As things develop, you start moving in that direction.
How is this national government going to be formed? That's what I want to understand. When people are saying government of national unity, how is it going to be? Is it not still the politicians, or are you?
That's what I'm saying. I'm saying the
technocrats?
politicians will mess it up, and that's why I'm not pushing for it, even though I have advocated it in the past.
Yes.
I prefer to talk about an inclusive government.
Okay.
If you had an inclusive government that had the best from all the parties and the best from all the zones and are working together. That's the national government. But it's inclusive because every part of the country will see themselves represented in the governing body. But that is why, if you again go to that lecture, people who has transformed their societies are exceptionally gifted people, intelligent, charismatic, and I give examples. Doing some of the things and doing is what we throw up people of that kind of people of that kind in Nigeria. When you will now find it easy for people to come, and they're not talking about where you come from, but they're talking about what you are doing and how they can help.
Yeah. So we're looking at ASU. You were once a lecturer. Were things this way when you were in the university? Were you always? Lecturers always going on strike. This is now the. Are we going to the third month of the ASU strike?
No, let's be fair. The kind of things happening in the university did not happen in my time. But the seeds of it were already being planted by government. The central problem about this is that successive governments have sat down to negotiate, and after negotiation, to make promises and they don't keep it. In other words, government has not been honorable. People in government have not shown integrity. So the result is again that thing I mentioned earlier, lack of trust. There is nothing you can do when human beings do not trust the system. That is why even when the government will say we will do this, yes, we heard that before. But it is possible to have a new crop, both in the university and in government, who recognize why education is important in the kind of Nigeria we want to build. So the university becomes priority. Because whether we like it or not, I'm a retired professor. Not only a professor that is known in Nigeria and outside Nigeria. My pension, which is a reflection of what I earned, is not enough to pay for the diesel that we are burning right now. My pension each year cannot buy the diesel. If people tell you what professors now earn in comparison with other African countries, I'm not even talking about UV shaped. So it's a matter of priority. If you have a government that has the priorities right, when you ask people to make sacrifices, they are willing to make it because they see you are making the sacrifice. We have leaders who are not prepared to make any sacrifice in the national interest, but they want other people to make the sacrifice while they grow fatter. That's the problem.
Well said. And then we're just thinking about something. Is it only on the part of the leaders that they are not keeping to that agreement? Do you think ASU is also not being, keeping to the terms, given the quality of students they are producing now, that it's making it almost very difficult for employers of level to have students they can employ without having to retrain them?
Well, let me say,
are they also living up to expectations in ASU?
It's easier for them to live to the expectation than it is for government to keep its word. And the reason is simple. I graduated from University College Ibadan. I taught in University of Nigeria for 37 years. 29 of those years, I full professor. In all those years, the material for the practical part of what I was teaching was never available really. And we are talking about the better days. What the facilities I had to be trained as an undergraduate in Ibadan in our time, I never throughout my 37 years experience have half of that to train my students. So, our students' facilities for training them have been going down and has remained there. As somebody says, you think that knowledge is expensive. Well, try ignorance. Nigeria has been living with ignorance. You cannot demand a certain high level of performance for your university teachers when you are not providing the basics that they need. However, by the very nature of the university, if what government doesn't provide, individuals, brilliant professors as well, manage to get it from the outside world. My research was supported by the Medical Research Council of Great Britain. There is nothing in my reputation, internationally, that Nigeria contributed anything to. But it was a national duty, and we're prepared to sacrifice trying to reproduce in my students what experience I had, not only at Ibadan but also in Cambridge, where I was trained. So it is like the egg and the chicken, which comes first?
Yeah.
The same situation we are seeing in the universities. In the 1960s, that was the situation in India. That's when the Indian university decided, the government of India decided that it is not possible to save the Indian universities the way they were. So they created the Indian Institutes of Technology, where the rules were quite clear. Only the best professors in India could teach in IIT. Only the best students could be admitted there. The result was that you introduce a new element of competition in the university system. If you want to teach in the IIT, you become you prove yourself by becoming one of the best. And because they applied that consistently, unwaveringly, the IITs got up. As they got up, they also started dragging up the other universities to higher standards. And India has it up to you that right now, all the major technology companies in the world, Microsoft, whichever name you want to, their CEOs are Indians. So they are dominating the management of technology companies in the world right now. Where is it coming from? From the IITs. Invest in your universities, the return will come later. But we have people who do not even know that is the way development, how development operates. Invest in human resources, which is why countries like Japan and a few others that have absolutely have absolutely no natural resources, yet they are wealthy because the human brain can create things that the human, beyond imagination. Take Dubai that we are all rushed to. What is Dubai? Dubai is the middle of the desert.
Yeah.
It's human ingenuity and human vision that took a patch of desert and created it into what it is, and it has become the center of the world. You want to go to the you want to go to the east, you go to Dubai, and you can go to Australia, and you can go to China, you can go to. You want to go to Europe, you go to Dubai, you can go to Europe. You want to go to US, you get to Dubai, and you can go there. It has become the center of the world because human beings dreamed it, worked for it, and it happened. It can happen in Nigeria.
Yes. Yes, that's quite an elaborate way of putting it. But is there any really way out for Nigeria? What do you see is the future? Because I remember one of the interviews we had, they said it was Nigeria is going through the pangs of a rebirth.
Yeah.
And we have been almost 7 years since you made that statement. And we have not seen any rebirth taking place. How long is it going to take before we see this?
When in the 2013 or thereabouts,
Yes.
when the economy was growing at 8%, if you had a government that succeeded that following what was being done, we probably would have been at 11% by now. But we went back to the first gear and started again at 2%. And 2% was again typical of what was happening when the military were in charge.
Yeah.
So we return to what we had passed. So long as you do not get the situation where one generation comes and builds, the next generation comes, not to break down the foundations, but to build on the foundation that has been laid, then you can grow. You can grow to the point where, for example, China did it and got to the point where they decided that only the best will be. They now made a rule that you get this generation their best and start training them, not only in terms of intellect, not only in terms of governance, but of the values of the society. That generation, then when that generation grows up to a point where it's part of the leadership, they become that generation is now in charge of China, and they run it for 10 years, and a new generation comes in, and we're doing it. Although it looks as if you wants to tweak it, what will happen, we don't know. But the important thing is that once you've started a process and you can continue it from 1, 2, 3 generations, the system takes off and it becomes an autopilot, but a positive autopilot, not the kind we are in now.
Let me just ask you this: how do you think? What do you make of the insecurity in the southeast?
The southeast security is easy to be solved. Why do I say so? It is easy to restore confidence in the youth if we now have a leadership that now tries to bridge the gap between the youth in terms of ideas, in terms of expectations, and so on. Because our youth still have the tendency to work hard, and that's important. Our youth have also shown that they can use their brains. What has now happened is that because of the way that everybody wants a shortcut to wealth, and the result, of course, has been that that talent they have, they've been using it for negative rather than for positive things. But you have the right kind of leadership. If you can multiply Soludo here, there, and there, you will suddenly find that people will look up to the government. And when they look up to the government, it's not so that the government will do anything for them. The government will create the right environment, like it was in Eastern Nigeria, for people to do the things they want to do, to to be the best they can. And you can now move that into, into other parts of Nigeria. You know one thing, even at this time, that things are bad as they are, whether it is Anambra, whether it is Abia, southeastern states still produce the largest number of good performance in the school certificate. Even now, because it's an attitude of mind that has been cultivated from generation to generation. The thing now to redirect them, to use that more positively, and to contribute to their training, and to contribute to other, good things being multiplied in other parts of the country. There will be confidence, not only between them and the surrounding states, but also between them and the larger picture of a bigger Nigeria. Southeast can drive that. The population to do it is there. And even when they talk about having the smallest number in terms of population, they forget that in every state of Nigeria, after those who are indigenous to that place, the next largest number of people are the Southeasterners all over the country. When you get to the point where you factor in the contribution to the national pool, then you realize that it's not the small figure ascribed who are left in the Southeast, that the greater majority are outside. But wherever they are, use them for the good of Nigeria.
Now, Kano's case, Nnamdi Kano's case came up yesterday, right? And the court quashed, day before yesterday, and the court quashed 8 out of the 15 cases that is being tried.
Yeah.
How do you see it? And how can that case be quickly resolved so that Nigeria can be more united and move towards 2023 election in peace?
I think that overall things have started moving in the right direction. What do I mean by that? You see, good leadership is shown not only in what you do, not only in what you say, but in the risks you take. A good leader will take some risks and will be prepared to put something on the table in support of that risk. Where we are, the Nnamdi Kanu problem, which did not start, as it were, to be violent or to be difficult for Nigeria, but to express the anger and alienation of the youth of the Southeast. I mean, let's be honest. Where does it make sense that, for example, you will do an exam, you score, say, 250 or more, you are denied admission into the university, and somebody who scored 150 is admitted. When that happens, it brings a sense of injustice. Remove that sense of injustice, you will find that people will now become reasonable. That is why it is necessary occasionally to take a calculated risk. And in this case, release Nnamdi Kanu. He has had his experience. Maybe give conditions under which he can enjoy his new freedom. But at least the youth will now see that this cult figure, the society is prepared to forgive him. And because the society has forgiven him, we can reintegrate ourselves in the society and do the things. And once you create a new atmosphere for the young people to look after them, to get something to do and so on, you find that there will be a sea change. They will now be the leaders of the new Nigeria that will emerge. But it's a calculated risk.
So in a way, you're saying that President Buhari should take the risk of
releasing, because when people, I should have been at a meeting that took place in Owerri on Saturday. When you look at the people that gathered at that meeting, and they once more said, there were two things emphasized. First is let there be a political solution to the Nnamdi Kanu issue. In other words, Igbo leaders are prepared to give the commitment that they will police him and he won't be allowed to get out of hand again. The second thing that meeting also concluded on was this question of zoning of the presidency, saying it is our turn, not because it is done, but because we are capable.
Yes.
It's not a turn by turn, we are capable. We will mention some of the names. Look through the Nigeria now. Can you have people better than who have actually shown competence more than some of the people we mentioned? Again, it's risk. Nigeria has to take a risk on the southeast, but it's a risk that is manageable. It's a risk that will produce bounty harvest for Nigeria. Old things have happened. Old things have given way to new things. We should build on the new. Even those who say, look at Obasanjo's government. Look at Yar'Adua's government. Look at Jonathan's government. Some of the leading names that did noteworthy things in those governments were Igbo. It was that system that produced Soludo, for example.
Yeah.
So why is it, when it comes to giving responsibilities to solve difficult problems in Nigeria, the Igbo man is called? When it now comes to the things that come out of our labors, to distribute it fairly and the good thing is that, the best teaching is by example.
Yes.
If the young people of Nigeria interacted, the Igbo youth will be a positive influence on the northern youth, for example, because they imitate each other. And the problems that are in the north that they want to solve will take a new direction. Liberate the country. Liberate the talent in the country. You will find that good, competent people will come from all parts of the country.
Yes. So do you also think that if Nnamdi Kanu is released, this sit at home in the southeast will end?
It has already it's already ending. Let me put it that way. Because two things have emerged. First, the IPOB people have said, they've withdrawn the order. People people should be free to go about their business. That's one. The second is that there is now a willingness about the Igbo leadership to tell the younger generation, this far no more. So people are taking back the obligations of leadership in the Southeast. Before now, we were all watching and things were going from bad to worse. But now, as we saw in the meeting on Saturday in Owerri, people are still saying enough is enough. So there's going to be a change. In fact, the change has already started. Because once there is agreement as it is now, it becomes easier to now look out for those rogue elements that have used the atmosphere of uncertainty to commit their own criminalities. And with it, reasonable distance, but in all that calculated risk, because part of that new thing, we saw Soludo also took a chance. He said, stop this. Fine. As a result of that, there's been an attack on the thing, but it is not going to make him stop. They are now going to be firmer hands to make sure that this stops. That's the way you begin and you build.
Did we learn any lesson from that sit at home?
There is nothing to do. There's no lesson. Well, we've learned a lesson. What lesson we learned out of it is how precarious the existence of our people are. Because that single day, people didn't go to do the little things they do to get the money for today's feeding. Showed that poverty in the southeast is still lower than it's up north or in some of the other parts of Nigeria, but it's still unacceptable. Now we know the measure of the problem. So the governors have said the job is cut out for them.
Did it affect other parts of the country?
I think the good thing that will come out of where we are now is that there are lessons we will learn, and this time the lesson will go throughout Nigeria because the suffering has been throughout Nigeria. You see, the war was an enclave war. We locked up in Biafra in southeastern Nigeria. We were at war. We were learning the lessons. The rest of Nigeria, our Wambe parties were still going on in Lagos, and Kaduna was still running itself as if nothing was happening. But there was a war. So the result was that lessons learned from that was not national. But this time, the lesson we are learning now is across the board. All parts of the country have seen their own measure. What they are suffering is different from what they are suffering in Benue. What they are suffering in Benue is different from what they are suffering in Ondo. And what they are suffering in Ondo is different from what they are suffering in Abia. So each one will take charge of his own problem and solve it. As you solve your own problem, you see that that problem will lead you to observe and understand the other person's problem, and then you join forces. So a new foundation for the country will emerge.
Is there any other thing you want to say with regards to what's happening?
More and more people. You know, in the lecture I gave, I titled it "In Search of Statesmen, Patriots, and Elders." That's what we see in Nigeria. Let statesmen in Nigeria stand up to the country. Not everybody will like what you're saying. Some people will be happy and say, good. It's good Professor Anya has said something. Some will also Professor Anya again. But that's not going to stop me from saying what needs to be said until we get out of this particular tunnel that we are in. And I'm sure that in every part of Nigeria, we have statesmen who are watching each other and watching the country. On Friday, on Friday, a former minister of the federal government under this civilian regime phoned me, said he had read the lecture, that my thinking fits in with the thinking of many of them in the north. He comes from the Maiduguri area. But that he asked me to go a step further, that I should have a meeting be of formation. And the two of them, and the two of us, will come and see, certain people in the north. That he believes, and many of them have confidence in me and have confidence in me. And therefore, if we come, the reassurance that many of them in the north are expecting, they lead to the election. Once they start getting that reassurance from them, that I will find that things will start going the way I'm suggesting. This is actual, you are interviewing me, so I won't give you the name. But it happened just this Friday after reading that lecture which you have published. And you know, of course, that Christopher Kolade and myself brought a group of elders. We're meeting from time to time, looking at the problems in Nigeria. They call us the burden elders. How did we get the name, you press people? Why did you call it? Because in that first press release, we started by saying we are burdened, and we then talked about the way the country was and so on. So you people now decided we were the burden. Such people still exist. We now need to multiply the number so that when so yes, we give Nigeria, whether people in government or out of government, people will listen because of the background and the track record of the membership of the elders.
Yeah.
Many of us were not looking for money any longer. We're not looking for office any longer. We're not looking for name. But we are interested in making sure that Nigeria shapes up and start going in the right direction. Because we do not only have children growing up here, we have grandchildren now. And we go into them to create, before we go, to create a better atmosphere in the country so that they can be the best they can be. That is not possible right now, which is why more and more young professionals are packing out as we speak to Canada. We must reverse that trend.
Yes. Finally, the Beijing conference happened in 1995. And after the Beijing conference, there was a campaign that was carried out, a campaign against violence against women. But you saw what happened with the signature. I don't know if you know this singer.
No, I saw it well. I
Yes.
used to enjoy it. I don't know the details of what happened, but I saw something saying about abuse.
Yes. Do you think violence against women is what we should be witnessing in the country?
It's not only violence against women. I think we must say clearly that in many things you cannot shut out half your population in taking part in running the country and doing things the proper way. We must create an environment in which sex does not define what you can do. It's what you can do that defines who you are. Unfortunately, most areas of Nigeria, the cultures of Nigeria had inherited patriarchal systems. And what we're seeing are the hangovers from that. But we just have to be patient and keep on the course, and things will start changing. I mean, how many men in Nigeria will not respect Ngozi Okonjo-Iweala? Hardly any. But she's a woman like any other. She has a husband. So as more and more of this kind of people are multiplied, it becomes easier to show by example what should happen. But it also means that there are things, you see, before, we used to teach history in the schools. We used to teach civics in the schools. Then suddenly, don't teach history, how does your children know that they are heroes in the country and therefore they are role models? It's history that teaches you what people have done, so that the bad ones you will see and say, the good ones, I wish, that's what I'm trying to be. And that is the way it ought to be. So our education is now central to what needs to be done in the new Nigeria that must come. The whole paraphernalia of education will have to change, because it is the human beings that will build that new Nigeria. It's not the oil that we have. We have seen that oil has brought us more costs than blessings. But the human beings, invest in them, you reap good, bountiful harvest. It also means, as in that same lecture we're talking about, you have to go back to the values of the society. In that lecture, remember, I drew attention to the 7 normative values in the Igbo society.
Yes.
That is why when the Igbos came out, there was a value system, and they judged success and failure on the basis of that value system. They judged what is right and wrong on the basis of that. And that's why they could do what they did under Okpara. Restore good leadership in Igbo land, restore good leadership in Nigeria. The sky is the limit for what Nigerians can do. The youth of Nigeria are showing every day what they are doing in Europe, in the US. Canada is hungry for more and more Nigerians, so, coming. But we will reverse the trend. More and more Nigeria will be here to build Nigeria.
I think we will now have to end it at that, even though there are so many questions too, especially the one that has to do with this fuel, importation of fuel, bad fuel into the country, which is reminiscent of what happened during the Abacha era.
Let's leave that. Those in charge know what is wrong. It is whether they have the courage to put this down. As a start from you cannot be subsidizing things that are not transparent and expect that the people in the society will take the suffering that's being inflicted on them ad infinitum. No, it won't happen. People will try to find their own accommodation until they find that as you find your accommodation, you bump into your neighbor who is also finding his accommodation. And there cannot be peace. But it has to start with the government taking the right decisions. And when you come to the point where 80% of Nigerian oil, we are told, is stolen, 80%. You ask yourself, do we have a government? Because if you have a government, that should not happen.
Don't know where to find who is stealing it.
Eh?
To find those stealing the oil.
Yeah. If you find them, and I'm sure those in government know them, unless you do something about it, it's like the bandits. Unless you get to the point where people know there's a price to pay for doing the wrong things, they won't stop. And that is what government is about. To define the areas, the incentives that should be given to people for good behavior, the reward to people for bad behavior. That's how societies correct itself. You don't have it, then it's a free-for-all. And the criminals will always have the upper hand when it's a free-for-all.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you very much, Sam. Now, we are finished. Just cut. I just want